James Vince found a bobcat along a dusty roadside in a quiet part of northern Wyoming. It was skinny and rough-looking, its coat dull with grime and its eyes tired, though still alert. At first glance, the animal seemed like a threat, far from where it should be. But there was something different about the way it moved, carefully, almost purposefully, that made James stop. He was used to seeing animals in this region, but never one this calm, and certainly not one that walked right up to a person like it belonged there. James had been heading home from the grain store that evening. He lived alone in a small cottage tucked into the woods, around 10 miles out of town. The sun was fading, casting long gold shadows near the tree line. That was when he saw the bobcat standing by the trees just past the roadside. James pulled over without much thought. He expected it to bolt the moment he stepped out. But instead, the animal stood still, watching him, unmoving aside from a slight flick of its ears. It did not snarl or bare its teeth. It took a few steps forward, stopped, then moved again. James stayed where he was, unsure whether the bobcat was curious or in trouble. Then it paused a few feet away, sat down, and blinked, slow and steady. That was when James noticed it was limping, favoring one of its back legs. Its ribs stood out under its coat, sharp and clear. It had been through a lot, probably more than once. James was not trained in animal care. He was not a biologist or a rescuer, but he knew when something was struggling. He opened the truck door, moving gently, not really expecting anything. To his surprise, the bobcat stepped inside and sat on the passenger seat without any fuss. James was not sure what to think. His gut told him to just drive home, so that was what he did. Once they got back, James spread out a blanket near the fireplace and set a shallow dish of water on the floor. The bobcat, still silent, drank slowly and carefully, then curled up quietly on the rug. James did not try to touch it. He just sat nearby, watching the animal, dusty and untamed, settle in as if it had always belonged there. By morning, the bobcat was still resting, its head now near the side of James's old couch. At some point during the night, it had moved closer, finding some ease in the worn cushions. James approached slowly, trying not to startle it, but the bobcat did not shy away. Instead, it made a deep, low sound, not angry, more like a quiet sigh. James figured it needed a name. After a moment of studying that thin, ragged face, he said out loud, "Moss." It seemed like a strange choice, but it suited him. James was not foolish. He knew that bobcats were not meant to live in houses. That afternoon, he called the closest wildlife care center and explained what had happened. The woman who answered was polite but clear. "Bring him in," she told him. "We will check him out. If he is healthy enough, he can go back where he came from." James Vince agreed it was the right choice. He placed Moss in a crate padded with towels and drove the 45 minutes into town. The rehab facility was clean and well-run, with signs that read things like, "We help nature heal, it makes the final call." They checked Moss, scanned him for injuries, and figured the limp was likely just a small sprain. "He is young," they told James. "Probably no older than 2. No tracking chip, no signs of captivity. He might have just gotten lost, or maybe even orphaned." They asked James to leave Moss there for observation. He nodded, thanked them, and returned home. But something felt off. The next day, he called again. "May I come see him?" he asked. They agreed but said it had to be brief. When James arrived, he saw Moss sitting silently at the far end of a cage. Not like the night by the fire. Now, the animal looked drained, dull, barely interested in what was around him. When James stepped closer, Moss looked up, eyes brighter now, and stood, gently pressing his side against the bars. No growl, no sound, just presence. James kept visiting over the following days. Each time, Moss moved only when he heard James speak. Staff began to take note. "He seems the calmest when you are nearby," one handler told him. "That is not normal behavior for a wild bobcat. You might have found something rare." One evening, something occurred to James that he had not realized until then. He checked the date, June 17th, the day before Father's Day. Also his father's birthday. His dad had passed when James was only 16. He remembered how hard that first Father's Day had been. Somehow, The timing of all this hit something inside him. He never believed much in signs, but this felt different. The next morning, James phoned the center and asked, "Has anyone come forward to take him?" Any sanctuary offered to help. When they said, "No," he did not wait. "Then I would like to bring him back with me, if that is possible." They were not sure. But after a long talk, and after he showed that his property was safe, isolated, and suitable, James was approved for a wildlife care license. It was rare. They made it clear, Moss could not be a pet, could not be tamed. But under supervision, he could live peacefully. James built a large space that opened into a fenced-off section of forest near his land. The perimeter was secure, using natural barriers. Moss had freedom, but also safety. And he had James. A few weeks later, they were walking along the forest trail behind the house. Moss was ahead, ears turning, body calm. Then it happened. The sound, sharp, echoing, ancient. Not a yowl. Not quite a growl. Something closer to a roar that had forgotten how to be one. It startled birds into flight, bounced across the trees like something out of another time. James froze. Moss turned, ears high, and let the sound out again. It reminded James of a dinosaur, raw, alive, somehow full of joy. Later, James told a nearby wildlife specialist about it, but no one had an answer. "Maybe it is just his way," the expert said. "Some animals do not follow the usual path." In the weeks that followed, James began to work with Moss more closely. He set up puzzles, challenges, and hidden scents around the woods. Moss caught on fast. He was not just clever, he was curious and eager. There was something playful in his nature. He would sneak through the tall grass only to spring out and ambush James, then sink into a deep purr-like hum, not threatening, just pleased. Moss loved riding in the truck. He would jump in before James even started it, rest at the window, and call out those strange ancient cries, at the air, at the birds, at shadows. One time at a fuel stop, a man panicked hearing the sound. James had to calm him down and explain. At first, people were unsure. But after meeting Moss, truly meeting him, they understood. That wild energy was not danger. It was life. Moss never hid how he felt. He did not pretend. If he was content, he showed it, pressing his wide head into James's leg like it was his way of saying thank you. He did not purr like a pet cat, but a deep, steady hum vibrated in his chest, a feeling that filled the space between them. When he wanted to play, Moss had his own patterns. He would leap onto a branch just out of reach, arch his back, and let out that same broken-sounding call, somewhere between a growl and a laugh, before bolting away, only to loop around and do it again, eyes glowing with energy. He wanted attention, not in a loud way, but with quiet insistence. He would lock eyes with James and keep the gaze, like he was trying to say something without needing words. And maybe he was. Maybe that look meant, "I am still here. Are you?" When James Vins read in the evenings, Moss would sit nearby, tail gently flicking, as if his presence kept the quiet from turning into something lonelier. James often thought how strange this would sound to someone outside Wyoming. "You live with a bobcat?" they might ask, eyebrows lifted, doubt clear in their tone. He could imagine the headlines, the judgment, the questions. But for James, it never felt strange or careless. It felt natural, like he had been waiting for something he could never quite explain, and one day, it showed up beside a gravel road, limping but calm. Moss was not just an animal. He was something more, a quiet rhythm that matched James's in a way no one else ever had. James had not planned any of it. He never woke up thinking he would bring a wild animal into his world. But plans, he realized, were not always useful. What grew between them was not built from logic or rules. It was about being present, about something simple. At first, James thought he was rescuing a hurt animal, giving him a place to rest, to heal. But what happened was something deeper, something neither had seen coming. Moss did not just receive care. He gave it wordlessly, without effort or demand. James had always been guarded, friendly, but distant. A man who preferred quiet, who stayed safe by staying closed. Life had shaped him that way. Trust had been hard-earned. He had learned to manage feelings, not welcome them. But with Moss, none of that worked. There was no use for masks or roles. The Bobcat's company required something honest, something real. When James felt low, Moss somehow knew. He did not try to fix it or make noise about it. He would simply curl up next to him, his body a calm weight, a reminder that someone was there. And when James laughed, those rare, unguarded laughs, Moss would answer with his odd sounds, twisting and rolling through the pine needles like something newly alive. There was no space for pretending anymore. Moss did not allow it. And somehow, James realized he no longer needed to pretend. As seasons changed and time passed, their bond deepened. Like a path pressed gently into the ground. Moss wandered through his area, moving like a creature that knew he was safe. But always he came back. Some nights he stretched out on the porch, golden eyes half closed while James sat under the stars. Other nights he would disappear into the woods, only to return when the fire burned low and the dark pressed in. Quiet, watchful, like a part of the wild that had chosen to stay close. And every time James called his name, Moss, the bobcat came. Not like a house pet. Not because he was told, but because he trusted. Because of something older than routine, older even than taming. A kind of shared language made from silence and breath and small glances. James understood something then. Nothing wild can really belong to someone. Not truly. Wildness is not meant to be owned. But now and then, if you are lucky, it chooses to stay near. And in those short, in-between months, somewhere between helping and letting go, something lasting took root. A man who had settled into a life of quiet distance found himself brought back to the world. Not by words, not by plans, but by the steady presence of something fully alive. He smiled more. He spoke aloud to the trees. He left the door open longer. He listened for those soft, steady steps moving through the brush. And more than anything, he began to feel again, deeply. In ways he had not let himself feel in years. There was sadness in it too. The sadness of knowing it would not last forever. But there was also joy. A kind of joy that reached the core of him. James often wondered how different everything might have been if he had just kept driving that night. If he had seen the bobcat, slowed down and moved on. He could have told himself it was not his concern. That it was not safe. That it made no sense. But he had not. He had stopped. He had opened the door. And in that moment he had stepped into something rare. He did not just find a creature that needed help. He met something that reflected something back to him, something long buried, quietly hoping to be noticed. And in that reflection, James found parts of himself he did not know were missing. In the end, it was not James who rescued Moss. It was Moss who rescued James. And he did it without ever needing to say a single word.